And that guest is Congressman Ron Paul. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I guess let's get right to it. The book is called End the Fed. Is that just a provocative title, or do you really want to end the Fed?
Well, I think both, but I'm also realistic. I'm not personally going to be able to end the Fed. The Fed will probably end itself when it ruins the money. But even in the book, my conclusion is that we should at least permit competition. I believe in competition in currencies. And that would be merely to legalize the Constitution and get rid of the restraints by our legal tender laws.
Right.
Today, the Constitution is outlawed, and we are compelled to use a depreciating currency, which means that long-term, nobody expects to save money for 10 or 20 or 30 years.
But that's a theoretical, long-term sort of position of yours. Every day, you're going to be chairing a committee. This committee oversees the Fed, at least on the House side. What do you plan to do to the Fed? Do you plan to call Ben Bernanke up there every 3 months? Do you plan to put pressure on him to give more disclosure about monetary policy? Do you change, and this is a big question, I think, do you want to change the Fed's dual mandate from keeping employment at a relatively high, stable level and combating inflation?
Well, I think the dual mandate is probably just for academic discussion. They could do anything they want if you just removed their mandate to deal with unemployment. Obviously, they totally failed on that. I mean, Look at where the unemployment is. The free market economists say unemployment rate is actually over 20% in real terms. So I think it's a good discussion, though, because the relationship of monetary policy to unemployment is very important. I blame the Fed for the unemployment because I blame them for the bubbles that demand correction. But the market doesn't like finding.
Do you plan on calling the Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke for regular hearings to press him on these issues? I mean, what do you plan to do sort of when you get on the ground, when you hit the ground running, I guess, in January?
Yeah. Well, in February he comes anyway. He's required to come twice a year, and there may be times, and I'm on Joint Economic Committee, he appears there, so he appears on a regular basis. So, yes, I will continue to do that. Transparency will be the big issue. Why shouldn't we know? Their budget is bigger than the congressional budget.
Right.
He can spend $600 billion just by creating the money and then not telling us where the money goes. I mean, there's no reason in the world. And I've had a lot of Democrats come up to me and say that this is a good idea. I had a lot of Democrats support me with the Audit the Fed bill last term. We had 320 co-sponsors.
You don't
the American people.
Are you going to reintroduce that bill?
Oh, absolutely. I've been doing it for 30 years. I'm not going to stop now. And I'm going to emphasize this, transparency. They've already released some information due to a token effort to get more transparency in the financial reform bill, but that's very incomplete. I'll probably start with, why don't you complete that report and tell us exactly what kind of collateral you got for all that money you passed out.
Well, there's a little news there. You're going to ask for the completion of that report, one of your first things in office.
Absolutely. They should be responsible under the law. That law is accepted, and they've sent us a half of a report out, and we need to know what the taxpayers got stuck with. You know, the banks are getting the Treasury bills. They get free money, and they get to buy the Treasury bills, and the taxpayers holding probably housing derivatives, mortgage derivatives, and that's not fair.
How would you grade Ben Bernanke? A to F. Where would you put him? His performance.
In what regard? I mean, to do a job that's impossible, he flunks and the system flunks. But the system is more important than the individual. So the system is flunking.
How would you grade him in terms of handling monetary policy in this country?
Well, I think very poorly, and he
F or A,
as well as Greenspan.
C? Would you give him a grade?
They all fail. They all fail,
Okay.
but it's not them because of their shortcomings. It's the shortcomings of the system. So Greenspan failed, so he gets an F. But you know, this is a big difference. Besides making it personalized, he is a central economic planner. He believes in inflation. He believes in depreciating the money so that the real debt goes down.
Well,
so it's the philosophy that gets the F.
Okay. One last question: when you take over the reins, if there's a need for a bailout of Wall Street, what will you do anything to prevent that from happening?
Well, I'll certainly be talking about it, but I don't think I, as an individual, would have the clout to overrule.
But your committee would,
and say.
Wouldn't your committee have a say in it?
Well, no. Under the conditions today, the Fed does what they want. I mean, we can't even find out what they do, let alone preempt them and say, don't do it. This is the problem. They're out of control. So someday I would like to rein it in. I mean, why should they announce that they're going to spend $600 billion? And people are getting upset with that. And not just people like myself. It's people around the world are upset. Other central bankers, people who hold dollars, are getting concerned. Half our dollars are overseas. So this is very, very important. To me, the biggest threat we have now is the bond bubble, which is part of the dollar bubble, and it will burst as well.
Well, it is
big trouble for us.
Isn't it bursting as we speak?
I think you're right. Interest rates, you know, he tells us he's going to inflate by $600 billion, and yet interest rates are going up.
So how can you how can you not give him an F if we do have if bonds are being sold off because of QE2?
Well, I just previously did give him an F.
Okay. All right. Now that we got, thank you, Congressman Ron Paul. Now that we got that settled, Ben Bernanke, according to Ron Paul, gets an F. Guys, back to you.
Okay.